Welcome back to Derry Public Radio. Reporting from the basement of the Derry Civic Center, this is Ben Graham with the news. After weeks of high-velocity paper cuts and spine-breaking throws, the Derry Public Library Dodge Book Tournament has come to an end. We go live to the scene with our sports correspondent. Take it away, Dr. John Hellajohn.
Thank you, Ben. Congratulations to the George R.R. Spartans, a newcomer this year with some of the densest firepower I've ever seen on the court. And in a wonderful twist, my father was inducted into the Derry Dodge Book Hall of Fame. Congratulations, Mr. Dr. Hellajohn. You're listening to Derry Public Radio.
This is Derry Public Radio.
Welcome back to Derry Public Radio, a bi-weekly Stephen King Book Club podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Joshua Kahn, alongside CM Alexander.
Hello, everyone.
And Benjamin Graham.
Yo, constant readers.
And today we are wrapping up part 3 of March Madness. We have done all of our preliminary rounds, and it is time to get to our semifinals and our finals.
We're going to have a winner by the end of this episode.
Yeah, we will have a winner of what is our favorite book by consensus.
What's the grand prize?
Bragging rights for that book. It'll go on the inside book cover.
All the books win because I'm going to give them all 5.
Okay.
This whole thing was a ploy to get CM to admit she likes some books better than others because her scores don't reflect that ever. All right, so guys, we're going to jump right into it with our very first matchup, our matchup of Misery versus Joyland. The thing that I think makes this a little tougher is that we talked last time about Joyland, or the first time about Joyland, that it's something we all think of so fondly. So how do you compare the experience of reading each of these books?
It is extremely difficult because I have such fond memories for both of them. I don't think that can be the metric that I judge them against each other. See, this is the problem I'm going to have from here on out, is there has to be one metric that each book is better than the other one, because these two are so equal. I think they're such completely different books, but I feel like they're a good matchup because they're both two of the more grounded stories. So you can't say, oh, well, I like this one more because I like the more supernatural stories. Can't do that here. They're both extremely well written. They both have really amazing characters that you really love or hate, or both in some of our cases. So this one's really hard to be like, okay, they're both good. What's the one thing that I can say about one that is not true about the other?
Well, in that vein, okay, CM, what is a reason you'd vote for Misery, and what's a reason you'd vote for Joyland here? What about either of them do you feel is the outstanding thing?
This is going to be so messed up. Because I would vote for Misery for having a character that stands out to me and I really enjoy being with. And I would vote for Joyland for not having that character, but having a story that it does the same thing for me as that character does in Misery.
Mm-hmm. You're right. Annie Wilkes is so iconic, and Joyland doesn't have anything even close to what I'd say absolute iconic.
No, its heart and its sweetness is what it has.
So how do you choose between those two?
You don't. I'm changing March Madness.
Are you calling? You can't just call it and they're all winners. That's not how this works.
How about you, Josh? What do you think when you think about these two books?
One of the things that I appreciate so much about Joyland is we talk a lot about the use of Ex Machina. Mm-hmm. And I feel like Joyland feels so real. We talked about that before, that it feels like it could have just been somebody's autobiography and not a King book, because there are so many things that those moments that usually get spoon-fed to our hero are not quite there. We talked about how other people do all of this work researching and bring it back to him, so we miss the detective part of the detective story, but that's this person's life. So it's just a real true to form story like that. Whereas Misery, there is such a sense of hopelessness for Paul that I was almost wanting I just needed a Deus Ex Machina. Like, I prayed for one for him. And in the end, he also doesn't really get one. He has to, he comes up with a great ploy, and that's what ends up giving him the surprise. So yeah, they both have such great storytelling beats. It's really hard to decide.
They're both amazing books, but to me, and I don't know if you guys agree, as good as they are, there's a clear winner here.
Should we go ahead and let's do our votes, Ben?
Like I said, they're both fantastic books, but it's Misery by a mile. It's, like I said, it's that absolutely, it's iconic. It's when you think of King, there are 4 or 5 books that immediately jump to mind. Immediately. And Misery for me has to be one of them. And I will read that book. Here's the thing. I will read the Misery multiple times more. Like, I will reread it every couple years. I don't know that I see myself going back and rereading Joyland. And that's just got to give it to Misery.
If I was going to revisit either of these books, I think I would probably read Joyland before I read Misery. Not because I think it's necessarily better, but because Joyland strikes me as a nice summer read. Like, it's not too long. It's a real easy world to just jump in and revisit. And I could see myself going back to that well more often than I can going back to the darker, more intense story.
A good point, because Misery isn't a light read.
No, not at all. It's very heavy.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna go with Joyland.
As we both slowly turn to look at CM for her very easy choice.
I would also revisit Joyland. I would read that again. Well, I read it twice already. And I've only read Misery once. And I would revisit that. I probably shouldn't for my mental health. But I would honestly, if I hadn't been the tiebreaker, I would have been happy either way. Because both of these books are so great. They're great in different ways. This is like The Dark Half and Rose Matter. Mm-hmm. But since I have to pick one, I'm going to have to pick Misery.
It's the only choice. There are so many moments of that book that will be with me forever. Whereas Joyland, it's just kind of the whole book is just melded into oh, that's nice feeling. Instead of like, holy shit, the part with the sledgehammer. Oh my God, the part with the lawnmower. Oh my God, him sneaking out of his room for the first time. There aren't any moments like that for me for Joyland.
Those big intense moments.
I'm going to say this one more time because I don't want to beat a dead horse. And I know I kept saying it over and over again in the other episodes. But Joyland I love even more because of the relationship I have with it through talking to you guys about it. And I feel like I need to stop making books win because of that. But then I think, no, bullshit.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, what do King fans want? Why did we start this podcast? They want to talk to each other about it, and it enriches the book.
Absolutely.
I mean, I'm still going with Misery. But that's why Joyland also would have been great to win.
It's definitely a very close race. And I completely agree with you. Listeners, you know that our ratings, these are not objective ratings. Like, we get yelled at sometimes that we rated a book wrong, but you should know this, and especially this March Madness thing, is not saying this is the definitive best book.
Oh, God, yeah.
This book is definitively best. This is just our feelings of like how much we personally enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And I did love Joyland because I got to talk about it with my friends. So that's super valid.
All right, our next matchup, we have Revival taking on Carrie. So, Ben, what do you think is going to be the deciding factor? If you had to go one way or another, what is the thing about Revival and what's the thing about Carrie?
Magic. Okay.
Is that a positive thing or a negative thing?
It is the thing they have in common.
True, yeah.
Oh.
This is how I am deciding to rate these two books.
Based on magic?
Based on their use of magic. Okay. I gotta think about this because this is coming to me as I talk. Carrie's use of magic. She has magic powers. She's a mutant. Super cool. But we aren't given any... I wish there was more. Like the lore. If we had some trouble with the weird book passages, but it would have been cool to get more of like, this is showing up more often in the country. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
We're like, man, this really reminds me of that town in Louisiana that got attacked by that guy with lightning powers. I don't know. Whereas the magic, big finger quotes, in Revival doesn't make any goddamn sense.
It's secret,
but by design. Okay, this is a very stupid line of thought, and I'm abandoning it.
That's, you know what? You're more than welcome to.
What I'll say is, over the course of this March Madness, I've been thinking about Revival more and more and more, and every time I do, I like it more. Just in my memory, the idea of the secret lightning is something I've been thinking about a lot due to the next book that we're reading. It kind of connects a lot of and hits a lot of the same points. And without going into that book too much, Revival does it better. So I've been thinking really positively of it. And I think I might have to go with it.
Do you think that's
yeah,
where you're leaning?
Maybe.
CM, how about you?
Carrie and Revival feel so different to me because Carrie is one incident. I mean, it's a bunch of little incidents leading up to one big thing. And it is more self-contained. And because of that and because of how King wrote it, which I really like how he wrote it, but it removes you slightly from the character. So you can't, like, I can't connect with Carrie quite as much. But on the other hand, I feel like she's this badass female protagonist who met a terrible end, unfortunately. And that tragedy is attractive and romantic and kind of cool. But Revival feels so much more to me. Like, I get more out of it. There's more to think about and discuss. I guess I'm always going to vote in favor of books that get a little more supernatural, sci-fi kind of. Yeah.
Revival raises questions that it doesn't answer, but in a way that doesn't leave you disappointed. It leaves you curious.
I would like to delete my previous statements because they were dumb and give a second point for Revival. Why is Carrie a horror book? Because bullied girl kills a bunch of people.
Because
I guess
periods are scary.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I forgot.
But the horror in Revival speaks to me a lot more because it's an existential terror. The whole end, the end of the book with Mother and the lights in the sky and the never-ending torment parade that waits us all at the end of life. That's
null.
That's one of the scariest things in the world.
It is so terrifying.
And I just think that really fucked with me pretty bad. So I really didn't give it enough credit when we first read it.
I feel like this book generally doesn't get a lot of credit because it's a very divisive book. Now, something that I think is interesting is that I feel like we could have almost the same exact argument in this matchup as we could in the last matchup, because you are dealing with an iconic character that is just ingrained into the culture of Stephen King, and it's more direct. And Revival is a lot like Joyland. It's that, where instead of a summer, though, it's Jamie's whole life. And yes, there are those supernatural elements, but big chunks of that story have nothing to do with supernatural elements. And so you're still getting that real story. So it's funny the way these two matchups kind of came. I'm going to ask this. If this bracket was swapped a little bit and Joyland was facing on against Revival because of those similar story structures, how does that change how you look at either of those?
I feel like that's cheating to make us rate two books against each other that did not come out.
Sure.
No, it's an interesting line of thought because before you started talking about that, I was having this terrible nightmare where we redid all these episodes. And I really think that our ratings would come out different. I don't think we'd have the same.
Well, yours wouldn't. But
well, I mean, right. They all get a 5 for me. But I think we could easily, with more discussion on each of these books and each of these matchups, I think we could change each other's minds.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
It so much of how I feel about any book or anything that I take in is so heavily influenced by just where I'm at. And I feel like this is for most people, right?
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
not just me. It's like it completely depends on where you're at in life, where if I would have read any of these books a month later, who knows? Maybe I would have liked it a lot more or less. Who knows?
Yeah.
So, yeah, once again, not objective rating.
So the reason I asked this question, because I think we're ready to call for our votes, and I'm going to go first. The reason I bring this up is because in our last round, I voted for Joyland, and by following, I just thought it was interesting following that train of thought. My default would be going to Revival, but I'm actually going to go with Carrie because as interesting as I find Revival, I will, and it's so fun to talk about the abstracts of what could be in Revival. There is so much to talk about what is in Carrie.
Mm-hmm.
There is so much in this short book. There is so much meat to talk about. Dissecting her relationship with her mother, the way she was raised, the relationship she has with other people, and the way she develops. Like, there's so much data in that book to have discussions based in the text as opposed to talking abstract. And I find that to be much more satisfying to discuss when you have more evidence to back up what you think.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to go with Carrie. CM?
I guess I like being teased because I'm going to go, okay, in an appropriate way. Is that making it worse? I was fine, but then you made a face.
I didn't mean to.
You know, I don't even know what point I was trying to make now. Revival.
The point, one of these days, I'm going to go through all of our audio and take all of the out of context things that CM says that we react to just a moment later, and you can make a compilation of it.
No, I know exactly where you were going with that. If you'd like,
Thank
you
you.
were about to say, I like being teased and stories that don't fill in all of the answers, allowing you to add to it in your own headcanon.
What I did wrong was I just stopped talking after I like to be teased. In my head, you were all there with me where I was taking it.
No, I completely followed you. It's the same way you feel about the breathing method.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is interesting because I was so ready to vote for Revival just because it has grown in my memory.
Yep.
And then you said the thing about your argument from the last, going against your argument from literally just the last bracket. And I was doing the same thing. I was like, oh, I spent all of Misery being like, it's iconic. You got to vote for the iconic thing. I was going to vote for Revival over Carrie. But now I'm switching it because I'm thinking about Revival and all of the stuff that was just the between stuff. I didn't need most of that book to be about him being in a band. I forgot about that part.
Okay, I liked that. Is that because my husband's a musician?
Might
Could
be.
be, yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, I'm voting for Carrie.
All right, Carrie is advancing. I do, when I think about Revival, that's the other thing, is that you think about those unanswered questions and those bigger things, and sometimes it distracts you from, oh, remember when there was like 50 pages of just about how he can still get it with a younger lady?
Yeah.
That book did give us recessing, though. I mean, that is...
Revival would have been an amazing short story.
Oh, yeah.
You guys, no.
No, it would. I mean, it would have.
I mean, yes, but
it's a great novel. It would also.
it would have been like the breathing method. It would have been like, wait. What's this null? I need more.
It's still like that.
But in an agonizing way, not a tantalizing way.
See, and I think that the story needs to be longer to get the payoff of the real hero of the story, Conrad. Conrad, his brother.
Oh,
the very first experiment that brings his voice back, and it's not sure whether that was secret lightning or not. And then in the end, he went back to being mute because he got affected. So that very first experiment was in fact connected to secret lightning somehow.
Right. I remember that book.
Do you guys believe what happened when he closed the portal to everybody who had been touched by the secret lightning? How can you not make this book the winner?
Are we just doing revival again right now?
Okay, moving on.
All right. Our next quarterfinal matchup, we have The Long Walk versus Rose Matter. Very, very different books. I'll go ahead and go first on this round. So if I was going to choose to vote for The Long Walk, or if I was going to choose to vote for Rose Matter, the reason to choose The Long Walk to me is I love the battle royale style of elimination. I love stories that have a body count predetermined into them, because it's such an interesting mechanic in those novels where it's, only one person survives this, and yes, you want to think it's your narrator if it's being told that way, but sometimes it isn't. And the end of this story very easily could have gone the other way, that it could have been him losing when it was down to the final two. And the grueling depiction of just walking. Like, when you hear the concept of The Long Walk, it seems, oh, okay, it's just walking. But when they get 24 straight hours into it and your feet hurt from reading it, there's just something so cool about that. So that is my pro for The Long Walk. With Rose Matter, the thing that would push me over for Rose Matter, I think, is the stuff in Rose Matter that is not the supernatural stuff. All of the real human experience told so beautifully and so horrifically to really drive the intensity across. Like, there's so many truly intense moments. One moment that I always go back to when thinking about this book is when she goes for that walk with Bill and unloads her whole life history to him, and he's just supportive, because this book teaches us that everybody she turns to is usually a shitty person. And like, that moment, there was so much weight in catching him up to everything we as readers knew. And so those that had really emotionally intense moments that I really loved.
I feel like The Long Walk kind of reaches out and touches you. Like you were saying, Josh, it makes you feel a certain way. And I think we talked about this about a couple of books. And this one does make you feel physically uncomfortable and mentally exhausted. And I think that is really cool. And that would be a reason that I would vote for The Long Walk. But Rose Matter kind of grabs you and pulls you into it, which is interesting because that happens to Rosie in the book. So you kind of have that duality of feeling yourself like you've been sucked into this other world when we kind of switch that writing style, and you're watching her go through the same thing. And I don't know, you feel a stronger connection. I think that's really cool. So that would be a reason to vote for Rose Matter.
Rose Matter is very, very real. It is so intense. Those parts, Josh, that you talked about, that the non-supernatural parts are written so believably. The characters are real people reacting to these terrible circumstances. And it is compelling and unpleasant and extremely well written. What I love about The Long Walk, however, is that it's almost a parable, or like it's sci-fi, kinda. It's that dystopian. I'm obsessed with dystopian fiction.
Yeah.
And the characters, it's not so much that they're characters in and of themselves. It's what they represent in this world, the people that have given up, or the people that are, ignoring the fact that this world is a shithole, but if we just keep going and trying, then maybe we'll turn out the winner anyway. And it's so otherworldly for being essentially a very grounded story. It's fascinating to me. And for personally, it's not really close.
Ben, let me ask you one follow-up question before we go to CM for her vote. Stebbins versus Dorcas. Who's a better character?
Yeah, no, I do wish they'd fall in love. Yeah, I've always shipped Stebbin and Dorcas.
Who's the better character?
We get more Stebbins. Dorcas is her name is Dorcas.
That's true.
But Dorcas is a very minor character. I think Stebbins is like key to the whole book. So I'd say Stebbins, hands down.
All right, CM.
I'm gonna have to go with Rose Matter.
Ben.
No surprise. The Long Walk.
So far, everything has been split. I'm gonna go with The Long Walk. I'm gonna have to go Long Walk on this one. And CM has left the podcast. She just ran away. Part of it comes down again to that rereading for me, that the Rose Matter this isn't gonna be a relationship that makes you happy, CM. Rose Matter is like apt pupil to me, in that if I pick it up, I am in the headspace to get my emotions rocked if I'm gonna read this, as opposed to if I wanted to reread these for the enjoyment of reading them.
That makes sense. And I'm less crushed by your vote.
All right, our final match. We have Pet Sematary versus The Breathing Method.
Damn it.
Do we really have to go over it? Everyone knows my... Okay, yeah.
I feel like this should probably be a pretty quick round. But for the sake of argument, what is beyond the club? We've talked a lot about the club itself. What does The Breathing Method have that Pet Sematary does not?
I was going to say it has a mysterious world, but Pet Sematary does too. The Thinny.
Yeah.
Like, where did they actually go? Were they just passing through that and now they're back?
But they're not back, because he looks up and the stars are unlike any stars he's ever seen.
That's right. So you actually get to go there. You get to go to that other world and explore it and see the horror, which is cool. And The Breathing Method just teases you the whole way through, which I like.
Yeah, which we all know. We all know.
Well established, CM's love of teasing.
As a standalone story, I think that's how we have to, at least in my mind, that's how I have to judge these, is as a story that stands by itself on its own merits. The Breathing Method is really good. Personally, I don't care for that framing device. And I'm sure if I thought about it, I could name a ton of things where they use the framing device of the story within a story that I actually really like. It feels like The Breathing Method is two different books that he tried to cram into one. He was like, I came up with this cool story about a woman who gives birth after being beheaded. And that's a really cool story. And then I have this other story about a weird book club that travels through different dimensions. But the one about the woman is too short to be on its own. And this book club one is kind of a half idea. So I'll just push them together.
See, I don't know. Like, I think it was effective how he wove them together, even though it's not really smooth. You could very easily argue that it was two separate stories crammed together, but I found myself just as intrigued and into it when we were experiencing The Breathing Method, and then those snippets back to the club, still intrigued and interested.
I think the Pet Sematary scared me to my core, unlike any book we've read. It was honestly so terrifying. The Breathing Method has those tense moments, but there's nothing inherently terrifying about it. There's
No,
suspense,
it's uncanny.
there's drama. Yeah, it's uncanny because of that. Without taking the extra space in the world into account, when you take a step back and look at it as it is, it's just a really entertaining story. It makes you excited to know more. Whereas when you get to the end of Pet Sematary, you have feelings. You have like real deep feelings about that ending. Even though that ending still leaves you unclear as to, what happens next, it's final enough that you get that sense of closure, I think.
The ending, it's so abrupt that it's like a punch to the gut. It's that ending of like, you're not going to give us, not only is it not a happy ending, but you don't even give us the closure of seeing it and knowing the outcome. It's such a good book, guys.
That ending makes me wish that all books had like 200 blank pages so that you didn't know that you were about to be at the ending.
Oh, that's a trip.
Well, it'd never work for me because I'm one of those people that always like looks near the back, not to know what happened.
You're just a skimmer.
Just to like
dirty skimmer.
Yeah. I don't know. I like to just check out what's going on back there.
All right, Ben, it's your vote first.
Oh, Pet Sematary. Did I say it last episode that I think Pet Sematary might be my favorite King book?
You were a little more assertive about it last episode.
Oh, I just didn't know if I
flat out said it was.
Okay, good. Well, I'm backing up because I couldn't decide whether I was going to say it's my favorite King book or just my favorite book because it is that good.
Josh, for shame.
I'm with
you
Ben.
You didn't even let me finish, listeners.
Because it's my turn. It's my turn to vote.
Right. Pet Sematary on our bracket. You don't know what I have to say that could totally
she could have
destroy
said something
both of your
so real that I would have changed my vote.
Yeah, let's see.
Well, I voted for Pet Sematary.
Okay,
so CM,
ready?
Yeah.
Pet Sematary.
Fair.
So much build up. All right, guys. This brings us to our semifinals.
That was tough.
Yes. But now we have Misery versus Carrie. And because let's open it up. Let's throw adaptations into the discussion.
Okay.
Because these
we've talked
about how iconic these both are. They are very iconic in their extra media. So for the sake of discussion, let's throw that out there.
I like that a lot.
Quality versus quantity. There's two Misery adaptations.
Castle Rock season 2.
Three actually, because it's the Kathy Bates movie, the Castle Rock season 2, and then the stage play Misery.
I did not know that was a thing.
Yeah, I have the script.
Wait. Oh yeah, sorry. You said I was like, but you showed it to us. That was Carrie.
No, that was Carrie.
And Carrie has 3 versions of Carrie, a musical, a sequel.
Honestly, I think 3 we're lowballing it. I think there were some that got snuck by and people just forget. Also, just like there's a Carrie episode of every sitcom ever, I think.
Yeah.
Where they goof on Carrie.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of Misery pop culture too, though.
True. I think there was a Treehouse of Horrors that ripped on Misery.
That's how I knew that scene, because I had never seen the movie or read the book before we did it.
I've never seen that Treehouse of Horrors.
Yeah, it's one of the newer ones.
Oh, I see.
I haven't. Yeah.
So which of these?
That's for our Simpsons podcast.
Springfield Public Radio.
I am in.
So which of these two do you think has the biggest pop cultural impact?
Probably Carrie, honestly.
Yeah, I would say Carrie because, I mean, it has the added bonus of being around since the 70s.
Oh,
Since
sure.
his first book.
Yeah, and Jesus, the number of times you see a TV show or a movie and someone gets blood dropped on them or something. There's always, there's just Carrie spoofs out the ass. And everyone just knows Carrie. I feel like Misery is still well known, but a little bit of more of a dark horse.
The amount of people that still don't know that the hobbling scene is different in the book shocks me. Sometimes. Because that's something, even without reading it, I knew that going into it, that it's different. I didn't know what was going to happen, but I was very excited when that moment happened. And I wonder if but what does it say about Misery that there's so much more Carrie? But I mean, for me at least, if you said we can watch any iteration of Carrie or the Kathy Bates movie, Misery, I'm watching Misery.
Yeah. Obviously. She won an Oscar for a reason.
Yes, she did.
That movie is nearly perfect. It's astounding, her performance.
And the fact that it could add a completely brand new set of characters never featured in the book, and they're almost instantly some of your favorite characters.
And it adds a layer to Annie that should not work, should piss us all off. And I love it. It's like, I'm glad that it's different from the book, and I wouldn't want her to have that vulnerability and softness in the book, because I really liked her character there as well. But having those both, I feel like it just doubled my enjoyment and what Misery had to offer me.
It's a perfect movie. It
really is. It's a rock solid movie. I mean, it was our first 5 out of 5 for a reason, you know? If I held out a copy of Carrie and a copy of Misery to you, which one do you grab?
Misery.
The book?
Yeah.
Oh, Misery. I'm going to try my best here to make a case for Carrie, because it's obvious which way the wind's blowing here. Sissy Spacek's Carrie is, I would say, just as good as Kathy Bates' Misery.
Yes.
Yeah.
She embodies Carrie, the character, so well with so little. It's not a big performance. And it wouldn't be for such a quiet, meek character, but just her face, the expression she can give with just her eyes is haunting.
Yeah.
It's up there, but is it better than Misery? Nah, man.
Or I think we've got enough to make our votes. So I'm first in this round. I'm gonna go with Misery.
Yeah, we could have done this one all together.
Yeah.
I thought you were making me vote when you asked me to pick a book.
No, I was curious what your gut instinct would be.
Misery.
Misery. Hands down.
All right, Misery advances to the finals, but now we have to decide what is going to face off against Misery.
Fuck.
The Long Walk versus Pet Cemetery.
This is my Rose Matter Dark Half, CM. These are two of my favorite books.
They're outstanding books.
You guys gotta go first, 'cause I don't know. I don't know what I'm gonna say.
For me, Pet Cemetery, like I said, works on that deep, dark, emotional level. The power of grief and the insanity, and how many people. We even spent time on the show discussing, if you had access to the Pet Cemetery, would you use it? And Sam and I were like, yeah, we would maybe see if we could fight it off. And then Ben had to bring Crashing Reality onto us. That's the point, is that you can't. And there's something
ridiculous question. Fuck no. Are you kidding?
There's something so cool about the reach that the area has and the control that it has.
I would help both of you go there and bury your people.
That's nice.
Even though I would know it would be a terrible idea. I'd be like, I'm in.
You just want to go.
That's very sweet.
Come on, man.
That is very sweet and very stupid. Don't do that.
That's how CM does.
I got your back. I hear you, Ben.
And then The Long Walk.
We're all gonna die.
Is that beautiful dystopia, the world building that is just subtle clues to how the outside world is framed. And yeah, I love the struggle. It's such a different kind of struggle. Like, theirs is so physical and mental, and Lewis Creed's is so gut-wrenching emotional that they both have such a visceral effect when you read them. It's about weighing, for me, it's weighing which one of those feelings is stronger. Which one am I more connected to? That's kind of where I'm at with these. CM?
For me, The Long Walk, if I hadn't read these books again, well, if I had read Misery not for the podcast, so if I had not read them both with more of a critical eye and an intent to dive really deep into the meanings and messages in the books, when I think about what would stand out to me, what book I would remember the most, it's more Misery. Or wait, I'm sorry. More Pet.
You can't vote for Misery yet. We have to wait for the finals.
It's more Pet Sematary to me because The Long Walk, it's more of an overall feel that stands out. I couldn't really remember a lot of the characters or what happened to them despite the awesome death scenes, but I could remember just the overall, what the book is all about that I always found fascinating and stuck with me. But Pet Sematary has moments that just like get at your heart a little deeper than more of that broad approach. For
me, I think both books are nearly perfect. I've been using that word a lot this episode.
A lot of things 3, but you're using perfect a lot.
These books are both just fantastic.
They're about a 3, both of them.
It's the highest grade I give. I think if I'm going to choose, which it seems like an impossible task, but if I have to choose, I am going to have to go on a deep dive and compare the 2 books' original cut endings.
Oh my God.
I mean, obviously, we covered The Long Walk had the cut ending where Garrity comes in his pants and his feet fell off and he dies. But we didn't discuss at all the actual original intended ending of Pet Sematary.
Oh, I see.
Because, we just talked about how the ending is kind of ambiguous. It's he's sitting in his kitchen and the hand falls on his shoulder and she says whatever it is that she says that's all creepy, and the book ends and you go, uh-oh, what's gonna happen? I did find the original ending of Pet Sematary.
Was it the same user?
Bango Skank on the official Stephen King fan forums posted the original ending, and I won't go all into it because I didn't actually write it down. But ends up that his wife comes back and they go and they get Judd and they put him in the Pet Sematary and they all get nasty.
I don't like this.
Yeah. They all get real nasty on each other.
Why are you saying it like that, Ben?
Well, saying like what?
No.
Like what?
Saying
He's not saying
nasty.
It's just that's how the book
the way
ends.
You're saying nasty is nasty.
That's how the book ends. Crandall.
Are you trying to make me vote for The Long Walk?
It's in italics.
And the rest of his family, they just all get real nasty on each other. And which is really how it should have ended.
That's true, man.
Anyway, I'm ready to vote. I don't know about you guys.
CM, you have the first vote.
Despite Ben's honest efforts here, I'm going to have to vote for Pet Sematary.
Ben?
It's Pet Sematary.
Definitely
all the way.
Pet Sematary.
This is the closest match-up I think we've had yet.
That's a hard one, which brings us to our final matchup. Which is not what this is. When I first put this bracket together and I filled it out just for myself, was not my final.
Are we going to have to go to like family counseling for a session after this?
We might, because this is...
It's like it's your favorite book and my favorite book.
Yeah, fair. In all fairness, both of these books deserve it. These hands down top 2 books that we have read in the past, in our first year of this podcast. Guys, we've been doing this for so long.
Almost 2 years.
Yeah.
Wow. That's cool. I like you guys. But yeah, these 2 are definitely top 2.
We're going with CM as her favorite book's Misery, your favorite book's Pet Sematary. I want you to argue the other person's book. So CM, I want you to give a pitch for why Pet Sematary should win over Misery, and Ben, Misery over Pet Sematary.
As great as Misery is, Pet Sematary is such a deep, profound look into humanity and grief. And I think everyone who reads it has experienced that to some level. And it just has this ability to touch you. And I will never forget reading this book. I will never forget those details, those moments that I was talking about when comparing it to The Long Walk. And that's, for me, kind of more important than what you get out of Misery, which is really amazing, but it's more of a shock and horror and less a real deep look into the human condition.
Misery is a masterclass in suspense. I cannot think of another book that every page had me on the edge of my seat thinking, how is it possible that this character can get out of this situation? Every chapter, the way he will get Paul through one terrifying, stressful situation only to immediately be beset by something so much worse is astounding. It's a book that you want to read just straight through in one sitting. And that's pretty rare for me. The characters, Annie Wilkes is one of the greatest villains of all time. And if we're still talking about adaptations, I think we can all agree Misery is a bit better than The Pet Sematary.
Right, yeah.
That's like comparing apples and oranges, though.
Very
Pet
true.
Sematary is so
Campy.
beautifully 80s. And
Misery versus Pet Sematary 2.
Pet Sematary 2. God, terrible movie.
How many potatoes were in Misery?
None, I don't think.
Yeah.
That's my argument.
Now, something that I'm trying to figure out how the best way to phrase this. Which is better represented, addiction or grief, between these? Because they are both represented so strongly. They are the core of each of these books. Which book does it better?
That's so hard to answer because I've experienced grief and I've not experienced addiction. So for me, I'd have to say grief, but that's why.
I have experienced both, and they're both done extremely well. But the themes of grief in Pet Sematary are so much stronger, so much more. I mean, addiction is, of course, terrible, and he writes about it extremely well. But I feel like grief is a more universally a universal feeling that anyone can read Pet Sematary and be absolutely gutted, because even if you haven't experienced a death of someone close, like, what is scarier than that?
Well, and it's written so well that I think even if you haven't had that kind of grief, you can very easily put yourself in their shoes and imagine it.
Absolutely.
There is a part of me that almost wonders if the addiction in Misery isn't better because with Pet Sematary, yes, a lot of that is authentic reaction, but the craziest part of his grief is already once the cemetery has its hooks in him. So you can... It's pretty much up to the reader to decide, is this choice he's making more based on grief making him irrational, or is it this outside power? Whereas with Misery, I think that being in his head swimming through his addiction is such a surreal experience, and knowing people who have coped with addiction, from all the conversations I've had with those people, it pretty much sounds like it's a spot on depiction, more or less, about how that feels. So I find that interesting. All right, this is it. This is the finals. Here we're going to crown our winner, and I think we should just go ahead and start with CM.
Why? Like, is it my turn or are you just being a jerk? This is so hard because they're both equally as good. I don't think that there's a right answer or a wrong answer. So I'm going to have to go with the thing that stands out to me, which is comparing favorite characters in each book. And obviously My favorite character is going to be Annie Wilkes, so I'm going to vote for Misery.
Misery was my favorite King book until, for this podcast, we read Pet Sematary. And I'm trying to decide whether it's close or not. Sure, it's close. They're both very good, but Pet Sematary, it fucked me up. Something terrible. And I loved it. The Pet Sematary.
Oh boy. So there's so much to love about both of these. God, this is a killer final.
Yeah, and remember, listeners, if you don't like what Josh posts, what wins, it's Josh's fault.
Yeah.
So yell at him.
Yeah. I think I have so many amazing memories of both of these stories. And there are scenes that are just fully burned into my brain from both of these books. There has been no bigger reaction from anything I've read than dealing with the grief that is in Pet Sematary. It is such... Well, I talked about it on the episode of the show when it says it's the most terrifying Stephen King book. I expected more monsters. I expected scarier things. I was not expecting soul-crushing child being hit by a semi sadness. And it tore through me. So I'm going to go with Pet Sematary. Pet Sematary is the winner of our inaugural March Madness. Good job, everybody.
Yay.
Don't worry, listeners. When we do Best Villain, Annie Wilkes will be
It'll
up
come
there.
down to Annie and George, and I will die.
Oh my god. So that brings us to the end of our first March Madness. I hope you guys had as much fun listening and thinking about what we had to say as we have had discussing this with each other. Well, that's it for this episode of Derry Public Radio. As always, thank you for listening. For CM Alexander and Benjamin Graham, I'm Joshua Kahn, saying see you next year.
Hey everyone, CM Alexander here. Thank you for listening to March Madness Part 3. We hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you guys have any ideas for next year's March Madness, please send us an email to derrypublicradio@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you. We've already heard from a few people with some awesome ideas so far. As always, follow us on social media at Derry Public Radio. Check out our website, constantreaders.org, for all things Stephen King and Stephen King adjacent, and visit our Patreon page to look at our tiers and get some awesome merch. That's all for now, listeners. Goodbye.